Hello everyone, welcome back. We're going to be talking about Bellacor today because I was sitting down reading through the end times again. Likely going to need some therapy for that trauma afterwards, but it made me think about Bellacor in Total War Warhammer because, let's just be very honest about it, Bellacor kind of sucks. You see, Bellacor was the main antagonist for the Realms of Chaos and introduced as a playable faction for the launch of Immortal Empires, probably in the worst way possible, because it does feel like there was no real thought for Bellacor. It kind of feels like maybe he was a last second addition. I mean, it's pretty obvious that that was the case, considering that he is a Warriors of Chaos faction, and really his only unique mechanic is the Unholy Manifestations, having access to more gifted units, getting some buffs, which some are quite good, some of them are just pretty awful. The Nurgle one, for example, just providing Nurgle corruption, and the Sinesh one doing immediate damage to the target, which can be pretty much avoided by certain NPC factions. The Zeech one is actually fairly good. It gives you a portal which allows you to launch some invasions. You already have some portals from the very beginning, and the Khorne one giving you some buffs just to do some extra damage. There's of course the corruption system, turning enemy lords into demon princes, but that is kind of buggy, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and is really only going to affect like immortal lords. Not to mention the fact that the Curse's Boom, so the one that actually opens up the rift for you to be able to teleport, is pretty awful at the very beginning, because you need vision of the areas to be able to do that, meaning that at the beginning, yeah, maybe Bretonnia, if you want to attack Bretonnia, but why would you as a Chaos Warrior faction attack Bretonnia when there are no Dark Fortresses there? There is nothing for you to gain from going to that location. You do have access to some rifts in, say, for example, Mordheim and the Southern Chaos Wastes, but the problem there is, well, you don't want to go to Mordheim because there are like no Dark Fortresses. Yeah, there's some in the Empire, but there is no reason to go there post that. In fact, when you're playing as Festus, you're incentivized to go back to Norsca, and the Southern Chaos Wastes is a shit show in its own regard. You're dealing with so many factions, there's no point being down there. You want to push back further up north. Now you can use the portal to go back into Norsca, so it's a little bit faster, but even then, I mean, it's a bit of a waste, isn't it? The Warriors of Chaos got a pretty good rework during the release of Champions of Chaos, but it's not like everything came in well. It's some stuff that was just kind of ignored there, and it really does show after some time. The Warriors of Chaos campaign doesn't really incentivize you to actually do some damage. Instead, it keeps you up north, which is very frustrating, and that's something that I've mentioned many times. They should use souls to be able to make more Dark Fortresses in different areas, but that's not what this problem is. I would argue that Bellacor was not handled very well, especially for a character like Bellacor, one of the most well-known characters, not just in Warhammer Fantasy, but Warhammer in general. He traverses all the different settings. He is known to be extremely popular because, yes, he's a bit of a Scooby-Doo villain, but he is the one who defied the Dark Gods. We're heading to an End Times DLC. Creative Assembly have stated that Archaon is going to get a rework, not talking about the Warriors of Chaos, which that does sound a little problematic, considering that it's not a problem with just Archaon, but the Warriors of Chaos. And Bellacor needs to have something changed to make him what he is. He is so important to the overall arcing story of the End Times. Hell, given the End Times lore, which I know garbage at best, is the reason why the End Times happen. Were it not for Bellacor's machinations, Archaon would not become the Ever-Chosen. And in fact, there were loads of reasons why Bellacor should be a lot different. So let's talk about it. Bellacor should have always been a Demons of Undivided faction. That's how he was represented in the Realm of Chaos campaign, and it sucks that the only representation for that style of enemy is, or playable faction, is Daniel. Don't get me wrong, Daniel's cool and all, but he's pretty awful and needs a bit of a touch-up. But he was very stylized. We could have had Bellacor being Undivided Demons also, with a tech tree, with a typical styling of what you were used to with Daniel, barring just unlocking troops naturally rather than needing a devotion bar, and made use of the fact that a very popular army from back in the day, because demons were relatively popular depending on the circles that you played in on the tabletop, actually had something different. It sucks because he's even represented as such in normal custom battles. You can use Bellacor in a undivided Demons of Chaos army. Maybe Creative Assembly wanted to avoid this because they saw the backlash of Daniel and decided, well, we can't do a free lord that's going to be more fun or just better received than the paid one. But the fact of the matter is, should have always been the case. He should have been able to recruit other demons and launched demonic invasions and having a reverse of the Gifts of Chaos system rather than getting demons, getting mortals. Hell, maybe instead of even devoting settlements like Daniel does, having an undivided chaos demon stronghold with the representation of just getting all of the troops from there. A natural building progression, more styled vanilla, but allowing you to be able to get buffs for all the different god-touched units and allowing you to mix and match like people have been wanting to with Daniel but are not able to. Daniel's faction incentivizes you to fully devote to be able to get the best benefits. So considering that he would not have to devote because there would be no devotion mechanic as Bellacor works his own machinations, that would have been enough to have a truly unique campaign with its own styling, which would incentivize people to play with the demons a little bit more. I struggle to even find enthusiasm to play with Daniel, but Bellacor could have had so much of a styling there that would have made perfect sense. Yes, it would require some extra work because that would have been, extra skill lines, especially for the Lord options, as they would need to have a undivided skill line, but stuff like that makes sense. In fact, we've seen Bellacor have access to some demons, likely through powers or being able to glamour them through different chaotic means. We've seen Bellacor running with demons before, but I know people would be saying, well, Bellacor works a lot more with mortals due to the Mordheim stuff and the other corruption, which usually relates to, cultists and stuff. It does look like Creative Assembly are not really going to hit cultists, like cultist units and stuff that we've seen with Dark Souls. I guess that could be either Creative Assembly or Games Workshop, which does suck because it would have been cool to see a lot more cultist stuff introduced. It does feel like a lot of overarching lore doesn't really make it into Total War Warhammer 3, and it could be game limitations, so that's perfectly fine, which is why I think that the Demons of Chaos Undivided stuff would work a lot better. Hell, what they could do is maybe just add in more cult mechanics for Bellacor, just to have it as, he's having his influence there. Well, they would have introduced cultist units. They could easily say, depending on how many cults you have, you'd get access to more mortals. To further introduce his end times plans, Creative Assembly could literally just add in a rework on seduction where Bellacor could, in fact, corrupt other factions. We know that were it not for Bellacor, Hellebrand wouldn't have fallen to chaos. There are a few factions who fell during the end times. Again, clusterfuck of a franchise. God, I hate the end times in general. Just really bad fan fiction from an official source. But that could have worked. If not, just easily making it a Demons of Chaos faction, still having the rifts and having that point of aggression could work quite well. But even then, I don't think it would be needed if Bellacor was introduced as a proper Demons of Chaos faction, to have a different styling and to not basically write off that race as a whole. The Demons of Chaos are basically written out by most of the fan base because of Daniel's introduction and poor handling too. I don't think they're ever going to go back to the Demons of Chaos. I don't think they're ever going to go back to Daniel, better yet said, but it's something that really does bug me. I've just been thinking a lot about the end times again whilst I've been rereading it, and then, the idea that we're just not getting any information from Creative Assembly, which kind of sucks. We were supposed to get some Beshiva information during mid-month for April, but that kind of went to shit, and they said, oh yeah, it's going to be end of April, just kind of showing that, there's still a lot of delays happening internally. Who knows what's going on, but it's just this whole thing of the end times coming now. I still think it's too early. I really do think it's too early. So much needs to be done, and there's so much that could be done in terms of other DLCs before jumping into that. They want the big money before they start focusing all their attention to 40k, yes, but there's a lot of factions that need help, and Bellacor is one of them. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below to start a bit of a discussion. It's important to talk about these things, or else Creative Assembly just won't handle it, and they won't do anything about it. Because they need to see discussion. They need to see that the fan base wants to see improvements to certain factions. If you're quiet about it, nothing happens. Anyways, I'll be live on twitch.tv/thegreatbookofgrudges today. We're going to be playing a little bit of Man of War Corsair. It's something I wanted to do last week, but I had to slow down with videos and streams because I hurt myself accidentally in the gym. I've started training again, you know, this has been something I've been doing for about a month, and I went a little too hard. Yeah, rookie mistake, but hey, I'm pretty happy that I'm back at the gym. I've got that motivation back. I'm feeling a lot more confident, which is awesome. But yeah, these things do happen. Anyways, have a good one, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye.